However, the chief integrity officer can only do well when the leaders of the company are supporting him or her. It's all about the leadership, friends. It's not about the rule books. They are educating and promoting awareness in their companies by having quarterly examination of the employees. They are auditing the employees, what they do in the absence of their supervisors. There are demo checks. There is a shopping which happens. You know, some of the management members will pose as a customer and they will mislead a person to offer them discounts or bribe. They find out that under pressure, what does the employee does? Does he give in or does he stand up to the company values? So there's a lot of way the ethical organizations will test you as an employee. They will test you in your interview, they will test you in your GD, that under a pressure, do you give in to compromise or do you stand up to your values? There is a booklet and a guide which is zero tolerance. Tata Communications has that. I have also seen in Bharti. Bharti Airtel has that. There's an ombudsman that in case you see anybody who is being unethical in the organization, you can complain against him or her. And he or she may be the CEO of your organizations. That is the type of companies you should look up to. That is the type of companies who have had 15, 20, 30 years of some history to them and they have not succumbed to the pressure of only earning money. It's all about setting the tone at the top. Everybody, every company wants to earn profit. Every company has a challenge of limited resources. And yes, we also have that anti-capitalist that, you know, the company should be about earning profit only. However, it's about the long-term growth. We will see if Flipkart is successful after 50 years. Flipkart is successful in the last 8 years and it's given a birth to a lot of entrepreneurs like me who have a dream that we can also bring a change in the world. However, 30 to 50 years is a long journey. Let's see where Flipkart and the other biggies are in 30, 40, 50 years. That's where the real proof of trust is. Corporate governance, my friends, is not about listed companies. That's a rule in India. Corporate governance is about proprietorship. Corporate governance is about a private limited company. Corporate governance is about a partnership company. Corporate governance is about you. It's about what you want to be. It's about the message you want to give to the society. It's not about the Companies Act. I don't believe it's about the Companies Act. A lot of companies have a policy of delegation of authority. A lot of work gets done not by the VP but by the DOA. So a lot of wrongdoings happen by DOA, that as a VP, I am the Chief Financial Officer, I have delegated the authority, मुझे नहीं पता ये किसने करा. So, you know, they'll focus and axe the person who did this. Delegation is misleading, my dear friends. A lot of times, the rules are set by the players themselves. They don't have an umpire. If you don't have an umpire, it's about you. How do you want to play football? How do you want to play cricket? Corporate governance means following some structured rules which are painful to follow. As an organization, as a startup, there was a choice for me whether I should opt for a service tax registration or not. I could have saved some money from some of the orders I got. I chose not to. I applied for a service tax registration and I am doing the way the business should be done, in my way. Let's see, the test of my character would be in the next 15-20 years. And I am saying in front of you, value me if you meet me in life 15 years from now. That's the time to test whether whatever I have said is true or not. On the stage, it's too easy for me right now. Well, there are 4 critical quadrants of corporate governance. Most of the companies don't focus on the top 2. They are always inward looking. However, corporate governance is very tough when it is outward looking. There are accountability, which we discussed in the previous talks by eminent speakers. There is a strategy formulation by which companies call a McKinsey or another company to form their strategy. But what they do internally in supervising and in policy making, defines a good corporate governance with a bad corporate governance. I like to leave you with a thought. Don't say maybe when you want to say no. How many of you have a problem at times, which we all have, that it's difficult for me to say no? This will be one of the moment of truths in your life when you will have to put your foot down and say no, or if you say maybe. If you say maybe, you will not be enhancing the corporate governance of your education institution, of your family, of your school, of wherever you do your internship or your company. So focus on what is right and do what is right at all times, no matter who is watching or not. Have a great evening ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your knowledge and experience and making this session so interactive. I'm sure we all will be able to connect with your valuable insights in various walks of our life. November 26, 2008 marked the Black Day in the Indian history. Terrorists simultaneously attacked about a dozen locations in Mumbai, including one of the most iconic buildings in the city, the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel. It shed the blood of many, leaving the entire nation in shock. This massive outbreak at Taj would have made it one of the most dreadful places to be, but there was something unique about the hotel that it rose from its ashes just like the bird phoenix. What made it possible for Taj to revive itself after such a big mishappening? It is its human resource practices that help Taj to regenerate itself. The case shows the human resource management can play a significant role so that the corporate social responsibility can become the way we do things around here. Now, may I request Ms. Sushma Mathur ma'am to please share your knowledge with us.
Whenever we talk about corporate governance, what is the first thing which comes to the mind? What is it that you relate to, which immediately would strike your mind? Anyone? Corporate governance?
Rules and regulations.
Yeah, and we remember Satyam as well, right? Perhaps Amul was so influenced that it came out with such an ad. So what was the story? Satyam promoters artificially increased the revenues and profits in the books. How did they do it? There was an inflated cash and bank balance of over 5,000 crores, which means the cash and the bank never existed. It was just a book entry. There was also a non-existent interest of 376 crores. So it was just a book entry, there was no interest which accrued. To inflate the balance sheet, what else they did? They understated the liability. They borrowed loan from various banks, financial institutions, companies, but they never stated in the books. So the shareholders, the public never got to know what is the actual position. So what was it that they were trying to achieve? They were showing the rosy picture of the company, by which the prices of the shares got up and they started selling their shares and started minting money. Irrespective of that, there was a huge gap which was there in the balance sheet. So the assets were fictitious, but still there was no real asset. Just to bridge the gap between the fictitious assets and the real assets, the promoters thought of buying their own company which had a huge land bank. But again, there was an issue. It was again overvalued. Generally, Under the Companies Act, whenever a company takes such a decision, it has to take shareholders' approval and board's approval. So the proposal was floated before the board and the shareholders. When the shareholders saw all of this, they refused to accept this. The board as well, and within a 4-day span, 4 directors resigned. So what went wrong? There were flaws. So we'll discuss as to where were the flaws, why did it all happen. So one of the flaws in the entire story was that promoters were involved in unethical conduct. They were involved in bribery, corruption and exchange of favors. They actively sold their stake and minted money and made the entire public. Insider trading. The law says that the directors, the promoters, the key managerial personnel, they cannot deal in the shares of the company if they have any price sensitive information. But the promoters did all of that. They indulged in the insider trading and they minted again money. The books were false, the accounting was all bogus. The board was chairman friendly. Nobody questioned the strategy, nobody questioned the actions. Independent directors failed completely. They never acted independently. Audit committee, the role of audit committee is to ensure transparency, but they again failed in their role. Various false disclosures were given to the stock exchanges. So this was the entire story of Satyam. What? So now we will assess whether we have adequate systems or whether there were adequate systems by virtue of which we could curb all of this. In India, companies are largely governed by Companies Act and the listing regulations. Now I'm going to tell you some of the provisions which are there under the Companies Act 2013, which you have to tell me later on whether those provisions are enough to regulate the companies or not, or whether we need to do something more to work towards good corporate governance. So these are the provisions which are introduced in the new Companies Act. First being the class action suits. What is a class action suit? If suppose shareholders or the depositors who have deposited money with a company, if they feel that company is not being properly managed, they can always approach the court and can ask for the appropriate orders. Many provisions have been introduced, many transactions have been notified which require shareholders' approval, so that the entire decision power is not confined to the board and it is not solely confined to the directors, promoted directors. Various prohibitions have been put on forward dealings. The directors, the KMPs, they cannot enter into any contract today, so that by virtue of which they can sell off or buy the shares of the company tomorrow. Insider trading also. Insider trading says that if the directors or the KMPs have any price sensitive information, then they cannot deal with the shares. Restrictions, various restrictions have been put on non-cash transactions between the company and the directors. Independent directors. Directors are the backbone of the company. So various regulations have been inserted, like the applicability, that which are the companies which will have independent directors, what are the qualifications, what is the appointment process, code of conduct has been introduced, their role and functions, the duties, Everything has been specifically prescribed now. Auditors, there are restrictions on auditors also, that they cannot perform non-audit service if they are the auditors of a company. So considering all of this, there are so many provisions now. So the question arises that today's day we have such kind of law, so do we need any reforms? Or these laws are enough to work towards good corporate governance? Any views? Not enough. What do you feel should more be done? So, don't you think that we should be... That's right, I agree with you, but I personally feel that we should be self-governed. The law is there, but we need to follow it in spirit. So there are provisions. If we follow them properly, I don't think we need much of improvisation. So that was the thought process. So in conclusion, I would say that we have to travel a journey from letter to the spirit. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for explaining the various ethical code of conduct and sharing your prodigious experience with us. It is rightly said, to win in the marketplace, you must first win in the workplace. Now I would like to request Mr. Arjun Nijavan sir to share his words of wisdom.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the team here for giving me the chance to present here. And I would really like to thank the presenters that came before. Puneet, you did a great job. Sushma ji, you did a good job in presenting the various rules. Just to start off with where Puneet left off, he talked about how, this need to self-govern comes from within. Ultimately, you have to look at yourself in the mirror. No one can do it for you. Whether you talk about an advanced economy like the US, which had the Arthur Andersen case, the case that they had with Enron, that case happened there. You talk about the most, and after that they put a lot of rules into place. So it's not a country specific or a South Asia specific or an Asian economy specific thing. Going back further, maybe some of you won't remember, Hansi Groni also had a case. And Hansi Groni was a guy that no one would have ever imagined would be involved in such an activity. That's away from the business realm, yes. But what he did was unethical. So that voice obviously may not have come from within. Maybe there's more to it than meets the eye. But integrity comes in everywhere. So when you had talked about the Chief Integrity Officer, I think to be the Chief Integrity Officer, you have to be the Chief Integrity Officer of yourself. No one can be the Chief Integrity Officer and enforce rule on you. It has to come from within because you have to deal with yourself. Ultimately, the choices that you make, for example, whether we talk about the Satyam example, the Enron example, the Hansi Groni example, Jadeja example, the recent match fixing case that happened, one has to be very careful about the way they lead their lives. And your life has to be, Puneet rightly said, you have to practice what you preach. If you tell anyone, be fit, and then you're not really fit yourself, I don't think they're really going to pay attention to what you're saying. So your life has to be the best example, and it has to really show people how to take life forward. So corporate governance, obviously there's a definition to it, and it's a fairly long definition. But to break it down into simple English, in its essence, if you ask me, it's a system of governing an organization. And within different ownership structures, it varies to an extent, yes. There are rules that need to be followed, but there are different ownership structures. All across the world, and I quote Harvard Business Review, 80% of the businesses in the world are run by family organizations. And the corporate governance there may be a bit of an issue because the businesses have been there for a while and people have their own way of running the businesses. But a lot of times these businesses only make it past the third generation. If they do make it past the third generation, they're only a skeleton of their past glory. Many reasons can be attributed to the fact that they couldn't make it. But I'm sure corporate governance will be right on top, which is the reason they didn't actually move on and ensure that they were governing what's going on. Oftentimes, the board, for whatever reason, better known to them, they deviate from playing a specific role. Maybe because of active interference from the board when it comes to the managing director or the CEO, but they have to play a role because ultimately it's them that are accountable for what's going on. So in the Satyam case, it was a classic example of where the managing director was overpowering, and ultimately everyone suffers as a result. It's a classic case of being an individual, as opposed to looking at the greater good, and he's the one that's suffering towards the end, along with many other people that have relied on him, that have counted on him, that have, sort of entrusted their future onto him. So, the need, what you see around nowadays is the want to make fast money. Everyone wants to make fast money. Everyone wants a nice car. They want a good life. Puneet mentioned how many of you have had girlfriends, how many of you have boyfriends. There's a big need to impress. In that need to impress, people take the shortcut, and that shortcut may be, lying on your sales report, forging a signature. But ultimately, those, as they say, lies have no bearing. They will obviously come out. Maybe if not now, maybe later. So it doesn't really make sense for you to do it. You have to go on with life, right? There have been cases in the organization that we have run. There have been thefts. There have been privileges within our stores. Since I run a few stores of Adidas, Levi's, and Benetton across the city. But who's the one that suffers in the end? For me, it's a financial loss. Yes, I get covered up by the insurance company. But the man that's actually done it is the one that's putting his career at stake. I mean, I can give you a classic example. I wouldn't like to take any names. There are at least 2 people that indulged in privilege at our stores, and they're not being given a job anywhere else. I got my insurance. My company did fine. Now we have a better code of conduct in place for everyone to sign when they join. But who's suffering now? Is the gentleman that actually did it. And they call me and they say, we're sorry for what we did, but you can't really be unethical and expect to get along with it. So, the corporate governance, when it comes in, I mean, like you rightly mentioned, there has to be ways to maintain it. There has to be, you have to have an active board which looks after the interest of what is actually prescribed as opposed to individual interests. So, the quality of public governance really impacts the level of law enforcement and in turn, the extent of bribery. I mean, whether you're talking about bribing the cop because, there was a challan that was going on. It's a part of the inherent culture in the society of a place. But if you take a decision, and I've always believed and I've always, lived through this, if you as a person take a stand, the whole world changes according to you. You have to be firm in your opinion and in your stand, and your conviction has to be good. And then the world revolves around you. You don't have to change for the world. I mean, it's easier said than done, yes, but try it. I'm sure it can work. So you have to look at yourself and you have to make sure that, okay, fine, the Companies Act did it in 2013, it came in and corporate governance has come in, yes. But you have to involve it in all aspects of your life, and that's the only way you can grow forward. Otherwise, you're looking at a short-term gain. And that's really not going to help you in the long run. I can assure you of that, and I'm sure they can also assure you of that. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your experience with us. Now I would like to request Mr. Mandeep Singh, sir, to share his experience.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here to share my opinion, views, ideas with all of you. Takes me back to my days as an MBA student and what we wouldn't do to be in the last row while a lecture was going on. But I guess times have changed as everything else has. Technology allows you to do the same stuff that we used to do in the back row, perhaps sitting in the front row. So I'm going to keep this short and simple and try and keep it interesting so that there can actually be some value add, learn from what you guys have to think, what you guys have to share, and hopefully share my experiences. I'm going to start with what is, becoming a favorite quotation for me. And it kind of sums up the theme that we have today, which is on corporate governance. It is about being true to yourself and stuff like that. So the saying is really very simple. And it says that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. Now in simple terms, it could be what Puneet started off with when he said, people don't follow what you ask them to follow, but people will follow if they see you doing the same thing. Now speaking in the context of a commercial organization, we want companies to behave ethically, or that's what we're talking about. That's what corporate governance is all about. So it's important to just step back and try and understand that why should a commercial entity, the entire purpose of a company is to make money, it's to make profits, right? Now why should a commercial entity be expected to behave in an ethical manner? And I'd love to hear anyone having a view on this. I can't see if you raise your hands, but if you just shout out loud enough, I'm sure I can hear.
Give and take policy.
What does that mean?
What you give, that you give.
If you give money, you get money?
Boss,
So would that be good corporate governance?
not necessarily.
Okay, so let me repeat the question. Thanks for your input. I'm saying, why should a company, can you hear me without the mic? Great. Why should a company, a commercial organization whose entire focus is to earn money for itself, for its shareholders, whatever, but why should a company be expected to follow corporate governance rules or standards? That's the question. Thank you. Hanji. Okay. I'm just saying we are talking about corporate governance. So if we just step back, why should we expect companies to adhere to certain norms of corporate governance? It's their money. Why can't they do what they want with it? Perfect. Can you please stand up? Whoever said that. Round of applause for her, please. Thank you very much. So this really is the very bedrock of why should we even talk of corporate governance or corporate social responsibility. Any organization, commercial, academic, research, anything, is using resources of society. And for that organization to behave out of sync with the needs of society is really not on. And whether we like it or not, over a period of time, organizations that do not behave in sync will lose. Okay? Let me give you an example. You're all management students, you would understand that perhaps. There is something called a brand value, correct? All of you are aware of what is brand value? Yes, sir. So if you know of an organization that it mistreats employees or does other some interesting stuff versus another organization, at the beginning of Sushma's introduction, we heard about what the Tata Group did after the Bombay terror attacks, and I'm sure many of you would have read enough emails on that. Now, after reading what the Tata Group did, not just for their own employees and guests, but for anyone who was impacted by the Bombay terrorist attacks, any sane human being will be willing to maybe spend a certain amount of money extra or walk an extra mile, but would go and buy a Tata product. That is what the implication of being a corporate, a responsible corporate citizen can do to your brand value. So as management students, and many of you may be doing marketing, finance, anything, don't think that जी मेरे को क्या है, जिसने corporate governance करनी है वो company का CEO है. It impacts you. Okay? Let me give another example. We are saying that in corporate governance, the companies, as Puneet mentioned and what was mentioned in, I'm sure, earlier conversations as well, we are talking of how we expect companies to behave. And company is a non-living entity, so it's basically how we expect employees of companies, representatives of companies to behave. But who is really seeing that how is the company behaving with its own employees? Who is the custodian of that? How a company should behave with stakeholders, employees, vendors, customers, government, anyone, society at large, is something that we've at least got under some rules and regulations, and we all have a view on it. But who really is the custodian of how a company is behaving or looking after its employees? Any guesses? Okay. I won't know, but I assume, I don't know. Who is the custodian of company behaving with its employees? Okay. No, I think ROC is also more on your compliance and all, right? Okay. How many of you here are specializing in HR? I can't see any hands, so I'm assuming no one. Okay. So my viewpoint, okay, and that's entirely what a panel discussion is about, that the HR organization within a company really is uniquely poised to be the custodian of corporate governance, to be the custodian of corporate social responsibility, and be the custodian of activities that a company undertakes to be more friendly, to be more emphatic with all stakeholders. And I'm going to just take this on to the point of what is the emerging role of HR and how corporate governance fits into it. The traditional role of HR was typically seen as hire a person, put him or her on the job, and if they do a good job, reward them. If they don't do a good job, get rid of them. With the passage of time, this role has changed 360 degrees. Today you have HR playing a much more important role. It's no longer a support function. It's a role that is out there, because the most important asset that any commercial entity has is its employees, or is its people. They could be employees, they could be vendors, they could be suppliers, distributors, anyone. But if that one person behaves with you in a positive manner, for example, you walk into a store of, Puneet was talking of, Arjun was talking of, a Benetton or an Adidas. You have Benetton, Adidas showrooms, right? So you're my new best friend, by the way. So you walk into an Adidas showroom, and maybe you've seen an ad of Lionel Messi and you say, wow, Adidas is cool. But the store that you walk into, the staff is busy chatting in one corner while you are waiting. Kiji, will someone come and ask me how can they help me? What do I want? Can they explain which shoe is good, bad, ugly, whatever? So if the staff is over there chatting, you will walk out from that store after 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds with a view that is totally opposite to what you had about maybe 5 minutes back. And you'll say, Lionel Messi or no Lionel Messi, I'm never going to an Adidas store again. So when the employee has such a strong role to play in the way you perceive an organization, employee, outsourced, clients, vendors, the role of HR really explodes, and how HR can add value to an organization becomes an endless stream of possibilities. In this line of thought of, organization being responsible for giving back to society, as one of you mentioned over there, the role of the HR organization, and obviously it stems from all leaders, it's not only the HR department. Any team leader is an HR manager, everyone in the organization is an HR manager. Their own willingness to hold themselves up for scrutiny, their own ability to walk the talk, and their own willingness to be transparent about what they do is ultimately what is going to decide how well an organization is perceived, how well it meets up to the metrics of corporate governance, and how easy it would be for an organization to follow various rules and regulations. As Sushma said, self-regulation is obviously the best way to do anything. And if an organization internally plays its cards well, if the learning and development within an organization is correct, if the communication within an organization is transparent, we will find more and more organizations willingly following this path of corporate responsibility and not having to be governed, not having to be told, not having to be scared with threat of punishment, penalties, and really following all this. I'd like to just end with, another quote, if you call it. We've all heard that, successful companies have very successful strategies, and, strategy is a much abused buzzword today. But I think there's this famous management thinker, Dr. Peter Drucker, and he is supposed to have said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So strategy is something that you spend a lot of time on, you spend a lot of resources on, and you want to perhaps go and attack a single problem or a host of problems. But if the culture in the organization is correct, it's at the right place, then you can trust your employees to do what is required day in and day out when no one is watching, and your strategy would then become much easier to implement, much easier to execute. Thank you very much.
Thank Thank you so much, sir, for your sharing your valuable insights. Now I would like to request Professor Sunil Gupta, sir, to share his words of wisdom.
Good afternoon. See, let me express my sincere thanks for providing me this opportunity to be over here to express my views, opinion on the topic sustainable corporate governance in the emerging market. See, my speakers have already talked much about corporate governance. Right from beginning, Mr. Puneet Raman talked about policies to be followed in the corporate sector. See, when we talk about corporate governance, basically it is not the policies, rules and regulations, statute, norms, provisions, but above all, you know, it is the intention, it is the integrity that matters a lot. So, corporate governance here, I would like to link corporate governance with one of a very good example. See, in taxation, you might have heard about tax planning, tax management and tax evasion. See, I being a chartered accountant, definitely I would like to correlate this concept with the tax planning, management and tax avoidance. See, of course, when we talk about tax planning, it's all, you know, compliance of rules and regulations, procedure, policies and all that. And keeping in view all these, if we minimize our tax liabilities, that is what we call tax planning. And as far as tax evasion and tax avoidance is concerned, you all might be well aware that there is a very thin line between these two. That if we do not follow the provisions given in the Income Tax Act, and if we minimize our tax liabilities by using colorable devices, this is what we call tax evasion. But as far as tax avoidance is concerned, you might be well aware about a very prominent case decided by the Supreme Court in 1982. It was McDowell India versus Chief Commissioner of Income Tax, where it was held that even if we follow all the provisions, rules and regulations, policies, everything we follow which is given in the Act, but our intention is not fair, and if we want to minimize our tax liabilities with the intention to take undue advantage of the provisions, then definitely it is a tax avoidance. And I tell you that the another case which was decided in 2004, and it was in the case of Azadi Bachao Andolan, that Supreme Court held that if we are following the provisions, we are not, you know, violating the rule and regulations, despite if our intention is not fair. Say for example, you all might be well aware about Section 80C of Income Tax Act, where we try to minimize our tax liabilities by investing our funds in the avenues prescribed by the Income Tax Act. But here, say for example, as far as house property is concerned, if I take the loan from my spouse, and if I know that yes, I want to minimize my tax liabilities, if I want to take the loan, I can take the loan from financial institution, from the banks and other avenues which are available in the market. But deliberately, in order to minimize the tax liabilities, in both the side, I deliberately take the loan from my spouse because I know that the waiver of interest on housing loan, I can minimize my tax liabilities, and on the other hand, if my wife doesn't fall under the tax bracket, that is, if the minimum income of my spouse is not above the minimum threshold exemption limit, then definitely she will also not be liable to pay even a single penny as a tax liability to the government. So here we both are not violating the provisions, but our intention is not fair. We are trying to reduce the tax liabilities. So in the same case, if we are following the policies, procedure of the corporate, but our intention is not fair. Say for example, my colleague, Madam Sushma Mathur, she also gave a very good example that what Satyam did is that they tried to, inflated the cash balance, bank balance. They tried to, understated liabilities, overstated assets, and without, creating the real values, they enhance the profit, they enhance the cash balance just through book entries. Though here we are not, deviating from the provisions, rules and regulation. So at the same time, if our intention is not fair, probably we will not be in a position to do justice. So here, corporate governance, I would like to summarize with a word, that is trust. See, if we understand the real meaning of trust, probably all the answer of our questions which are lying in our mind, probably will get the answer of all those questions. Trust, it stands for, see, first alphabet is T. It means transparent. There must be a complete transparency in the procedure, in the policies. Then R, second is responsibilities. So each and everyone working in the corporate sector, or those even who are directly or indirectly associated with the corporation, if they feel themselves accountable, then again this concept of corporate governance can be achieved. Then U, uncompromising. We should not compromise with the false procedure. We should not compromise with the quality. We should not compromise with the procedure. We should not compromise with the policies and all that. Then S, successful. So when we are accountable for each and every actions undertaken by us, when the system is transparent, when the policies are transparent, then of course we can achieve success through excellence. Then last one is T, temperate. So we should take care, avoiding, major risk. Maybe, by taking care extravagance, we can minimize the extravagance. Then, we can minimize the risk associated with the, market. So in that sense, if we understand the real meaning of trust, probably we can achieve this concept. So with this, I summarize and I extend my sincere thanks to all of you to listen all of us very patiently. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your knowledge about taxation with us. It's an honor to have you here. Now I, on the behalf of Maharaja Agarsen Institute of Management Studies, request Dr. Vijay Khurana sir to please present the token of gratitude to Professor Sushil Gupta sir. May I request Ms. Anju Bharti ma'am to present the token of gratitude to Mr. Puneet Raman sir. May I now request Ms. Sunita Tank ma'am to present the token of gratitude to Ms. Sushma Mathur ma'am. May I request Dr. Lokesh Jindal sir to present a token of appreciation to Mr. Arjun Nijavan sir. May I now request Ms. Shilpa BSL ma'am to present the token of gratitude to Mr. Mandeep Singh Bachchan sir. Thank you sir, thank you ma'am. What we do for ourselves dies with us. What we do for others and the world remains and is immortal. Thank you all for sparing your valuable time and sharing such diverse insights on the subject. I am sure it has been a great learning experience for all of us. Tomorrow the session will start by 9:30 AM sharp. All the students are requested to assemble by 9 o'clock in the auditorium. Thank you.